Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. Who are you right now? And better yet, who do you want to become? Because the truth is, you're only 7 days away from becoming unrecognizable to the person you were last week. But it won't happen by accident. It will happen by intention. This is not about surface level change. This is about radical transformation. This is about deciding once and for all that you're no longer available for mediocrity, for excuses, for fear, for procrastination. This is about mastering your mind, your money. Your mission change doesn't begin with action. It doesn't begin with a new planner, a new gym membership, or another self-help book sitting unopened on your nightstand. Change begins in the invisible realm, decision. Before transformation ever shows up in your body, your bank account, or your relationships, it starts in your spirit, in your mind, in the moment you say, "I will not live like this another day." See, people talk about wanting a new life, but they're afraid to bury the old one. They want elevation but resist separation. But nothing extraordinary is born in indecision. You've got to make a decision so loud, so final, that your past starts trembling. The moment you decide, truly decide, you send a signal to your brain, your habits, and the universe that the old version of you is no longer available. You fire the fear, based you release the excuse, making you. You retire the one, day dreamer, and promote the right, now, executor. This isn't the kind of decision you make lightly. This is the kind of decision you make when you're tired of being tired, when you're sick of watching others pass you by while you sit on potential. This is the kind of decision that doesn't care what time it is, what day it is, what you're wearing, or how you feel. It's not convenient, it's commanding, it's not gentle, it's aggressive, it doesn't whisper. It shouts, because it knows that until you make this decision, life will keep handing you leftovers. Life will keep reflecting your hesitation, not your ambition. You can't tiptoe into your future. You have to kick the door down. Most people don't realize this. Indecision is a decision. It's a decision to stay stuck, a decision to stay broke, a decision to stay small, and the longer you delay the decision, the deeper the roots of your current life grow. But the moment you decide with finality, you rip those roots out. That's the power of decisive energy. It doesn't entertain options that contradict the vision. It doesn't leave open doors for your excuses to walk through. Now listen, your brain will resist this kind of decision. Why? Because your brain isn't designed to make you successful. It's designed to keep you safe. It wants routine. It wants predictability. It wants to protect the version of you that you're trying to escape. So when you make a decision that says we're going higher, your mind starts screaming, "But what if we fall?" That's when you have to talk back. That's when you have to say, "If I stay here, I've already fallen." You have to remind yourself that comfort and greatness cannot coexist. One must die so the other can live. You don't need more information. You don't need a longer strategy session. You don't need to ask 5 more friends for their opinion. You need to decide that enough is enough. Decide that discipline is the new standard. Decide that you're no longer going to react to life. You're going to direct it. Decide that your dream is your responsibility, not your family's, not your friend groups, not your coaches, and not your bosses. Just yours. And once you decide, really decide, something incredible happens. You wake up differently. You walk differently. You talk with a weight in your words. People look at you and say, "You've changed." And they're right. You have. Not because the world shifted, but because your inner world did. That shift sends shockwaves through your schedule, your standards, your associations. And suddenly, you're no longer tolerating what you used to entertain. You are no longer making room for things that don't build you. You're no longer apologizing for being hungry, focused, or obsessed with your assignment. This decision is not a feeling. It's a contract, and every day you renew that contract with your actions, your thoughts, your habits. You don't negotiate with your old self anymore. You don't revisit the past just to get closure. You've closed that door already. Your only job now is to show up like the decision is permanent, because when you do, your energy will start attracting opportunities that used to ignore you. Your clarity will begin to repel confusion. Your decisiveness will make people stop guessing you, because you no longer guess yourself. This is what it means to become unrecognizable in a week. Not because you've done everything yet, but because you've made the one move that changes everything. You've declared war on average, you've made peace with discomfort, you've signed up for the climb, not the couch, and the moment that decision is made, you are no longer the same. You can feel it in your bones, see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You only need the decision, because that decision, backed by faith and executed in obedience, will do more in 7 days than hesitation will do in 7 years. Your life doesn't change when you set goals. It changes when you control the first hour of your day. The way you start determines the way you finish. If you roll out of bed already reacting, already checking notifications, already feeling behind, you've lost control before the game even starts. But if you command your morning, you command your mind, your spirit, your attitude, and your energy. The morning is the battlefield where victory is won or lost before the world even sees you. Most people don't realize that what they call a bad day was really just a mismanaged morning. When you wake up late, hit snooze, scroll aimlessly, and wander into your day without intention, you are surrendering authority before the first hour even ends. The world does not respect people who don't respect their own time, and your morning is where you teach yourself to honor your life. When you get up with purpose, you build momentum that multiplies. It doesn't just affect that hour, it compounds into your afternoon, into your evening, into your attitude, into your performance, into the conversations you have, and into the way people perceive you. Most importantly, it affects how you perceive you. You look at yourself differently when you kept a promise to rise. When you do hard things before the sun comes up, your confidence doesn't come from compliments. It comes from completion. You don't need validation when you've already proven to yourself that you're built different. There is something spiritual about the morning. It's the time when your mind is most moldable, your soul most sensitive, and your heart most available. What you pour into yourself during those moments becomes the foundation for every decision, reaction, and action you take for the rest of the day. That's why you don't waste your morning on noise. You don't start with the news, the gossip, the emails, or the weight of yesterday. You start by locking in with who you really are and where you're really going. You sit in silence, you breathe, you journal, you pray. You don't ask the world who you are. You remind yourself of who God already said you were. That's where your identity is reinforced. That's where clarity begins to form. That's where excuses begin to die. Some people say they're not morning people. That's just a story you've told yourself long enough that it became a belief. But beliefs can be changed by behavior. The truth is, you don't need to be a morning person. You need to be a purpose person. When you're aligned with something bigger than you, you stop chasing sleep and start chasing destiny. You stop worshiping comfort and start honoring calling. You stop counting hours of sleep like a victim and start counting moments of opportunity like a leader. Because the morning doesn't just belong to the disciplined, it belongs to the decided. You use the morning to set your mind before the world tries to sway it. You use it to command your emotions before someone else provokes them. You move your body not just to get fit, but to remind yourself that this vessel is a temple and it will not be neglected. You speak life out loud because your words create your world, and what you declare in private will manifest in public. You don't wait for motivation. You manufacture it through movement, momentum, and mastery, and once you've established a morning routine of discipline, everything else starts to fall in line. You stop negotiating with yourself over small things. You stop doubting your ability to follow through. You stop reacting to pressure and start generating power. You know how to command a room because you've already commanded your day. You begin to feel a shift, not just in how others treat you, but in how you carry yourself. Because when you take control of the morning, you no longer need to control people, situations, or outcomes. You are in charge of your internal world, and that makes you dangerous to anything trying to stop your external progress. It's not about waking up at 5 a.m. to impress someone. It's about waking up like you have something on your life that matters, like you've been given another day for a reason, like time is a gift you won't waste, because when you start treating the morning as sacred, you start treating your life as sacred. When you wake up with worship, with work ethic, with a warrior mindset, you start stacking small wins that turn into massive results. And those who watch you from the outside won't understand it. They'll think it's luck. They'll call it talent. But you'll know. It was the momentum you built in the first hour, before the world ever saw you coming, before anyone knew what you were planning, before a single soul gave you credit. You'll know it started in the dark, in the quiet, in the unseen hours when no one clapped, but heaven paid attention. And that kind of momentum doesn't just change your day, it changes your identity. Your environment is either fertilizing your future or feeding your failure. Nothing impacts your transformation faster than the space you live in, the voices you listen to, and the energy you allow to sit at your table. You can't become unrecognizable by staying surrounded by people who only recognize the old you. If the people in your life are more committed to your history than your destiny, they will constantly pull you back into places you've already outgrown. You don't need people who are impressed by your potential. You need people who hold you accountable to your purpose. You need voices that don't just cheer when you play it safe, but challenge you when you play it small. Because your environment will either give you permission to settle or push you to stretch. Transformation is not just personal, it's environmental. You can have the right goals, the right mindset, the right strategy, but if you're in the wrong environment, you will suffocate. A toxic environment doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it's dressed up in familiarity, comfort, and fake support. Sometimes it's people who say, "I just don't want you to get hurt," when really what they mean is, "I'm scared of who you're becoming." They'll tell you to slow down, take it easy, not because they love you, but because they're terrified that your growth will expose their stagnation. You have to be able to discern the difference between people who are protecting you and people who are projecting onto you. You weren't created to stay in rooms where your presence is tolerated, but your growth is resisted. If they can't handle your hunger, your fire, your focus, that's not your problem. It's your signal. You've outgrown that environment. A seed will never bloom in soil that wasn't designed to nourish it. The same way a plant will wither without sunlight, your purpose will shrink in the absence of challenge, excellence, and truth. That's why in this week of transformation, one of the most critical steps is to clean up your environment. You clean your house when you want to live better. You clean your room when you want clarity. So why wouldn't you clean your relationships when you want to rise? There are people in your life who were only meant to walk with you for a season. But because of loyalty or guilt or shared history, you've let them stay past their expiration date. You've tried to carry people who were never supposed to go where you're going. You've tried to explain your vision to people who don't even speak the language of purpose. And it's draining you, not because you're not strong, but because you're not aligned. The moment you elevate your environment, you'll feel it in your energy, you'll hear it in your conversations, you'll see it in your decisions. Because you can't rise in toxic air, you can't fly in a cage, and you can't become unrecognizable while sitting in circles that constantly remind you of who you used to be. You have to normalize being in rooms where you're not the smartest person, where you're not the most experienced, where you feel just a little uncomfortable, a little stretched, a little humbled, because those are the rooms that provoke growth. Those are the people who call you up. Those are the conversations that activate new levels of thinking. You don't need more comfort. You need more challenge. You don't need more praise. You need more pressure. Not because pressure is fun, but because pressure is how diamonds are formed. You weren't meant to shine in the dark corners of complacency. You were meant to shine in the fire of refinement. Your environment should reflect where you're going, not where you've been. If you walk into your space and it doesn't make you feel focused, driven, and aligned, then it's time for a change. Look around your home, your workspace, your digital world, even your social media. Ask yourself, is this helping me expand or keeping me distracted? Audit your circle and your schedule. If it doesn't add to your purpose, it's subtracting from it. This level of transformation doesn't happen by accident. It's curated. And the fastest way to curate momentum is to change what you're exposed to. Every single day exposure is powerful. When you get exposed to a higher level of living, thinking, believing, and executing, you cannot go back to the ordinary. When you've been in rooms of greatness, mediocrity becomes irritating. When you've tasted purpose, settling becomes impossible. That's why you have to be ruthless with what you allow into your environment during this transformation season. You're not judging people. You're just protecting what God is doing in you. You're not isolating. You're elevating. And sometimes that requires distance, distance from doubt, distance from distractions, distance from dysfunction, because when you get your environment right, momentum becomes natural, discipline becomes easier, and clarity becomes consistent. You stop questioning your decisions because your surroundings reinforce your standards. You stop losing time on nonsense because your environment keeps you locked in. You stop minimizing your voice because your environment expects you to speak with authority. This is not just about who you are. It's about what you're willing to walk away from, because sometimes the version of you that everyone respects is the very one you need to leave behind so that the version of you you've never met can finally emerge. Most people are working hard but getting nowhere because hustle without alignment is just movement without progress. The world glorifies hustle like it's a badge of honor, like grinding yourself into the ground somehow proves you're worthy of success. But there are people hustling every day who are still broke, still tired, still confused, still out of sync with their purpose, because they haven't learned the secret that obedience will take you places hustle never can. Obedience means you're walking in alignment with your assignment, not just doing more but doing what's right, what's ordered, what's destined. When you move in obedience, your steps are ordered, your time is protected, your energy is multiplied, your peace increases even while the workload grows because now you're not striving. Your flowing hustle is what the world teaches you when you don't know your value. It tells you that you have to earn your worth, prove your significance, outwork everyone just to be seen. But obedience begins where identity is secure. When you know you're already called, already chosen, already qualified, you stop chasing results and start receiving strategies. Hustle will have you burned out by Wednesday. Obedience will have you elevated by divine design. Hustle makes you reactive. Obedience makes you proactive. Hustle is about force. Obedience is about faith. And in 1 week of choosing obedience, you can break cycles that years of grinding could never touch. The problem is, most people think obedience is weakness. They think it's passive, but it takes more strength to submit than to strive. It takes more discipline to wait than to rush. It takes more courage to follow divine timing than to chase someone else's deadline. Obedience doesn't mean you don't move. It means you move when it's time. It means you don't build something just because you can. You build because you're called. And when you're called, the resources show up, the favor flows, the doors open, not because you kicked them down, but because they were always yours to walk through. You can spend your life hustling for crumbs outside your calling, or you can step into obedience and live in overflow. Because obedience attracts what hustle chases. Hustle says you have to fight for it. Obedience says it's already written. Hustle says compete. Obedience says covenant. Hustle says earn. Obedience says inherit. When you understand that, you start moving differently. You stop being impressed with being busy. You stop letting the world measure your progress by how tired you are. You start asking, am I building what I was born to build, or am I wasting energy trying to look productive in the wrong assignment? It's easy to get addicted to hustle because it feeds your ego. It makes you feel important. It gives you the illusion of control, but obedience breaks your pride to build your purpose. It teaches you to listen more than you speak, to follow instruction even when you don't see the full picture, to take steps that make no sense to people who aren't walking in your shoes. It teaches you that delay is not denial, that quiet seasons are not punishment, that hidden seasons are preparation. Obedience requires trust, not just in your talent, but in timing, not just in your skill, but in strategy. Not just in what you want, but in what you're assigned to do. When you operate in obedience, you don't need validation. You don't need applause. You don't need everyone to get it. You move like it's done even when it hasn't happened yet. You speak like you already have the contract. You walk like the vision is funded. You prepare the space before the blessing arrives. That kind of posture can't come from hustling, only comes from alignment. Because alignment produces acceleration. When your spirit is aligned with your mission, you don't have to beg for opportunities. You become the opportunity. You don't have to chase people. You attract the right ones. You don't have to fake confidence. You become the kind of person who moves with conviction, not because you've mastered the plan, but because you've mastered surrender. This week is not just about doing more, it's about doing what matters. It's about removing the noise, canceling the pressure to perform, letting go of the addiction to busyness, and getting quiet enough to ask, what is required of me in this season? It's about no longer worshiping work and starting to honor wisdom. Because obedience is wisdom in action, it's not the loudest path, it's not always the most glamorous, but it's the only one that guarantees you won't waste your life chasing someone else's vision. Hustle might build you a name. Obedience builds you a legacy. Hustle might get you applause. Obedience gets you impact. Hustle wears you out. Obedience builds you up. And if you spend this next week not just grinding, but aligning, not just pushing, but listening, not just working, but walking in step with what you were created to do, you will look back 7 days from now and realize that what changed everything wasn't the work. It was the obedience that decided what work to do. You've got 7 days. That's 168 hours to create a new normal, to burn the old blueprint, to build a version of you that is so aligned, so focused, so favored the old you wouldn't even recognize the new one. You don't need more time. You need a stronger decision. So if you're ready to become unrecognizable, not someday, but this week, then stand up in your spirit. Stand up in your vision. Stand up in your purpose. And declare with every step, I will never go back to who I was, because who I am becoming is far too powerful. Thank you.